Hello friends, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to like and subscribe as it greatly helps out the channel and I'd really appreciate it. Enjoy! Well, keeping on with this dark side, right, we
Yeah.
have the next article, Religious Doubt and Depression in Later Life, Gender Differences in the Buffering Role of a Supportive Pastoral Relationship. Also a forthcoming article, and this is the one, was this the one with Neil Krauss?
No,
No,
so
no,
this
no,
this I did with two graduate students at Baylor, Rebecca Bonhog and Mandy McGowan.
okay.
So we teamed up on this project. Yeah, it was using Neil Krauss's data.
Okay, that's
So yeah, it was using two waves of it.
yeah. I,
Yeah,
I was like, I remember when I was picking them out. I'm like, oh, hey, Neil Krauss always, I usually enjoy his
yeah. I
stuff, and it's
mean,
always the giveaway for me is like, all right, later life adults,
yeah. I
probably,
mean, I think the leader in religion, spirituality, and health in later life.
mm,
And so I'm been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to collaborate with Neil on some other stuff, and he's been just incredibly generous with data and with his time. So yeah, this one wasn't with Neil, but it
mm,
was certainly influenced heavily by his work.
yeah.
Sure.
Well, and especially it's late life, right? Is
Yeah.
such a paramount moment, and
Yeah.
why to me it's always fascinating because I know some people might think like, well, later life, but what about the growing? It's like, well, later life, it's you're getting close to the end, and that's when you
Yeah.
start, right, the whole people become very religious towards the end,
Yeah.
or in this case they start having to deal with doubt.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, like do people become more religious as they age? And the answer tends to be yes. Why? I think just because, concerns about death are brought more to
Hmm.
the forefront. They're worried about what's going to happen to them. Maybe they have more time to engage in religious pursuits. But it's an interesting question of like, okay, like, for an older adult to have doubts about their faith or
Hmm.
about like religious or spiritual matters, like why is that so consequential? And it's because again, like these issues are just so much at the forefront. And so if they have this doubt, like, are they going to be more impacted, as far as their mental health than younger people?
Yeah,
I think the jury's still out on that one, but
yeah, it's a fascinating question, and it has a lot of implications.
yeah.
And so, the biggest one, we're kind of hitting on it earlier with our talks, but so
Yeah.
religious doubt is, to me, it seems like doubt is something that would come into mind when something horrible happens to you, right? It's
Right.
like,
Right.
how could you let, God, how could you let this happen to
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
So I think, and broadly, I wanted to ask, has there been an upswing in doubt after or even during the
Yeah.
COVID-19 pandemic, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, here we, like you're
Yeah.
saying, if you view God in a punitive light,
Yeah.
here's another quote unquote plague
Yeah.
to punish us.
Yeah. So I mean, yes, to answer the question, yes, I think it has increased. So we know that during the pandemic, so data collected roughly 1 year into the pandemic, about 1 in 4 Americans experienced some form of religious or spiritual struggle. So maybe that's
Mm,
with the divine, maybe it's with their beliefs, maybe it's with members of a religious community. That's a fairly high percentage, right? That's
yeah.
1 in 4 people, regardless of whether they're religiously affiliated or not. That's
Yeah.
pretty significant in my view, like, that they
Hmm.
report struggles, of a reasonably serious nature, in one of those domains that I mentioned. So, yeah, I think it has increased. I think it's interesting, like, we had the recession back in '07, '08,
Hmm.
right? Probably increased a little bit after that. And then life was kind of normal till probably the election in,
Yeah.
what was it, 2016?
Yeah. 2016. And then it's been
Uh,
crazy since then.
and then it's been like one thing after another. I
Right.
mean, with pandemics and wars and threats of other wars. And I mean, it's
Hmm.
been, just a very divided society.
Yes.
And with a lot of challenges. So yeah, I mean, I think, our first inclination during those times is, well, like, how could God let this happen? And it was interesting, like the first couple months of the pandemic, one of the most the greatest increases in Google searches
Hmm.
was for prayer.
Huh.
So like there was like a 20-fold increase in Google searches for prayer. in the early months of the pandemic. And prayer, like, maybe to ask God for help, but maybe also just try to
Oh.
communicate, like, "What the heck's going on?" Like, like, this is for most people just a completely unprecedented
Yeah, it's just
thing. Like, you want me to stay home? You want me not to work? You want me to have online school with my kids?
yeah, it's
Crazy.
bedlam, to use
Yeah.
the religious
Yeah, yeah.
term. Yeah, it's wow, I didn't realize that, but it totally makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
when people, right, it seems that when we no longer feel in control of all that, right, like you have zero power, it's
Yeah.
like you need to find someone or something that does have power that can hopefully make sense of it
Yeah.
all.
Well, and here's the thing too, right? The pandemic shut down churches in most places.
Which was a huge deal because that,
Yeah. So
right?
you're thinking, okay, like if people are gonna go and cope and use their religious beliefs and practices, and they've lost, this sense of community, they've lost the ability to gather with like-minded believers. Like prayer is kind of the way to go, right?
Hmm.
Like I can do it at home. I can do it when I want to. I can
Yeah.
engage with God who can maybe help fix this
Hmm.
problem, right? And yeah, I mean, I think when all else fails, like there's no atheists in
Yeah.
foxholes, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh man, that'd be a twist.
yeah,
Like, and how you say it too is, a lot of people think it's like, well, oh, church is shut down, just do what everyone else did and zoom in. But I'm like, again,
yeah. I
and the point
mean,
of this paper, we're talking about later life adults who may
yeah,
and usually are not as
technology,
technology
yeah,
savvy
yeah,
so they don't have the Zoom. So all
yeah,
that connection that they had is completely gone,
yeah,
right? The
yeah,
whole, um, which probably, of course, leads to not just doubt, but perhaps anger. And again, right? It's like, this was my rock, and
yeah,
now my rock is gone. Like, because, this
yeah,
pandemic, if God caused a pandemic, and right? It's,
yeah.
it,
Well, and there's just it took away like, the opportunity to like to see your clergy,
yeah,
right? To
exactly.
receive communion,
Yes,
to
that's,
have, like, sure, sitting in your pajamas watching, church service or mass over Zoom. Okay, like fine for a week or two, but there's no, I don't think there's any replacement for that.
no, no.
Virtual is not in person. You can't compare the health effects of that. And actually, in some ongoing work, we've looked at it, and basically, people who were able to attend in person during the pandemic, at least when churches opened again, had much better health and mental health than people who
Yeah.
attended virtually.
I,
And we know this.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean,
Yeah,
especially again, these are individuals who have been going to church in person usually for the
years.
majority of their
Yeah,
life.
years.
So yeah, for that to
Yeah,
be cut back, and like you said, it's like, all right, it's different to do like even some sort of virtual church thing for a week
yeah.
or two, but then it's
Yeah, then it's like, well,
okay.
I'd like to be there.
Yeah,
Like, I'd like to actually see my fellow parishioners. I'd like to,
right.
you know, shake hands with my priest or minister,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's all that informal networking and
yeah,
informal, sometimes almost like counseling and
yeah,
just like
yeah. Like,
coping.
I'd like to have the donuts,
Yeah.
after service or whatever.
Oh, y'all got donuts? We just got tacos in the morning when
But
I used to go. Yeah, they weren't that great, but I
okay,
can't complain. They were free, so
free, yeah,
yeah, it's
free.
free. Yeah,